Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Medarga Velazian. Coming up in today's newscast. The U.S. and Israel hold a week-long joint military drill by land, by air, and at sea. What are the major threats to face the state of Israel in 2023, and could a deterioration in U.S. Israel ties be among them? And ILTV sits down for an interview with one of Israel's leading tech visionaries. How soon will autonomous cars become a common fixture on city streets? Jordan announced that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with Jordanian King Abdullah in Amman. The Prime Minister's office confirmed the meeting and said that the two leaders discussed regional issues with an emphasis on strategic cooperation, security, and economic ties between the two countries. The PMO also said two leaders reiterated the long-standing friendship and partnership between the State of Israel and the Kingdom of Jordan. Jordanian reports also indicated that the two discussed the status quo agreement over the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Hebrew News Channel N12 said that the meeting between the two leaders was preceded by a preliminary meeting with Defense Minister Yoav Gallant 2 weeks ago in Amman. The channel also said that taking part in the meeting were the head of the Shin Bet, Israel Security Services, the head of the National Security Council, as well as Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer. And the Israel Defense Forces and the U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, launched a large-scale joint exercise in Israel and off its coast on Monday. All the details in the following report. The week-long joint military operation dubbed Juniper Oak aims to test collective U.S.-Israeli readiness and improve the interoperability of both militaries. According to the IDF, the exercise will simulate target strikes and training in complex terrain while integrating joint communication, command, and control systems. As such, the Army said the drill will see Israeli Navy missile boats and a submarine that will maneuver in tandem with an American aircraft carrier. Additionally, an American tanker will refuel Israeli SAR 5-class corvettes in offshore waters. During the exercise, the U.S. and Israeli air forces, navies, and ground forces will conduct coordinated strikes against targets representing maritime threats. Additionally, the IDF said that the Israeli Air Force and U.S. Air Force will simulate training in different types of terrain and with several types of aircraft, including American bombers, which will drop live munitions across southern Israel. And Israeli ground forces and the U.S. Army will perform a joint training drill consisting of ground maneuvering and dozens of rocket launches, during which long-range rockets will be launched. The IDF said the exercise provides an additional layer of defense among the militaries to counter a variety of regional threats. And speaking of regional threats, the Institute for National Security Studies presented its annual report on major threats to Israel for 2023 to Israeli President Yitzhak Herzog. The report detailed a number of threats, including the Iranian nuclear program and a possible collapse of the Palestinian Authority, as well as internal frictions within Israel. But another main threat, according to the INSS, is the potential for a rift in U.S.-Israel relations. Joining us now to discuss this threat is CEO and founder of the Israel Defense and Security Forum, Brigadier General in the Reserves, Amir Avivi. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
So before we get started on the report, I do want to address Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to Jordan today. What was the purpose of this meeting? What was behind it?
Well, I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu, even before he started his position, he talked about the need to enlarge the Abraham Accords, strengthen the relations of Israel with the Sunni world. This is part of a largest strategy that wants to, at the end of the day, build a coalition with Israel, the Sunni world led by Saudi Arabia and the US and Europe. Against this emerging threat, we see the alliance between Russia and Iran, backed up by a Chinese economy. We see a different world that is in front of us, and the West needs to wake up and align itself with this new reality. And I think that in this sense, Israel has the key to solve these issues.
Now, I do want to talk about this report. One of the major threats outlined is a possible rift for deterioration between Washington and Jerusalem. I mean, why is this the case?
I don't think it's the case. I completely disagree with this assessment. It's not, always there is a talk about possibly the American administration not being happy about the Palestinians or other issues. But really, when you look at the big picture, when you look at the huge challenge that Russia and Iran are posing in Ukraine, in the Middle East, when you look at the prospect of Israel's ability to bring an historic peace agreement, and Saudi Arabia is not just another state. If we manage to do that, this will bring peace with Pakistan, with Indonesia. This will take down prices of oil. This will create new chains of supply through Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Israel, something that President Biden talked about. What we see in IDSF, in the Israel Defense and Security Forum, is a huge opportunity and interests that are aligning. Now, we see a lot of noise and even vilification of the Israeli government, which is terrible by itself. But I think that reality is stronger. And in this reality, I see emerging strong interest between the U.S. and Israel. As we are seeing now in this drill, we are seeing the biggest one we have seen ever between the U.S. Army and Air Force, Navy, and the IDF, looking at the prospect of having to deal with this Iranian threat.
So you would disagree with the report's assessment, but the report does address the ongoing polarization, not necessarily in Israel, but in the United States. And we are hearing calls against Israel within the Democratic Party and even within, the fringes of the Republican Party. And now with this new right-wing government here in Israel, it has been a source of frictions. Are these voices escalating, and could this harm us in the future, despite the wonderful security ties that the two countries share?
So I think that the problem is that there is internal issues going on in the states that are affecting Israel. It doesn't matter which government will be here. The fact that there is a tendency to divide things between the Republican and Democratic parties in a way that if the Republicans support something, it means that the Democrats must be against. It wasn't like that in the past. In the past, these two parties were centric. Both of them were very strongly aligned to Israel. Now, it's obvious that inside the Democratic Party, there are elements which are anti-Israeli. But having said that, we've seen President Biden not really wanting to go into the Palestinian issue. He's worried about China, Ukraine, and mostly worried about what's going on inside the U.S. And in this sense, we see an opportunity. As I said before, Israel can give a lot to President Biden by bringing a change here in the Middle East that will benefit the U.S. dramatically. I am a big believer in real interest. It's all about interest. And once interests are aligned, I think the prospects are good. So let me be optimistic. I think that we'll see a strong relationship between Israel and the U.S. It's needed. It's needed against Iran, Russian intervention in Iran, what's going on in the Middle East. The U.S. needs Israeli know-how and technology. We need the U.S. So I think we're going to have a lot of doing together.
Let's hope so. All right, Brigadier General in the Reserves, Amir Avivi, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
And now a new survey released this week in war-torn Ukraine has revealed that most people in the nation consider Israel to be a friendly country that supports them. Israeli news site Ynet reports that the Kiev International Institute of Sociology's poll of Ukrainians found 52% saying Israel was supportive and only 12% disagreed. 43% oppose Israel's decision not to provide air defense systems to Ukraine, while a minority say they understand Israel's hesitations. A full 87% of Ukrainians believe that Israeli technology would be needed to help their country recover after the war with Russia is over. And turning to our region, 64% of Ukrainians said they support Israel in its conflict with Iran, and 60% see Israel as victims of Palestinian aggression. And moving on, Iran. This week, the European Union backed down from designating the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, as a terrorist organization, opting instead to sanction a few dozen officials. This despite its clear involvement in terror activities in Ukraine and around the world, and even against its own people. Joining us now to discuss is Emily Schrader, senior correspondent for Ynet. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Emily, what is behind the decision not to add the IRGC to the terror list?
Well, I think that overall we've seen a long history, several decades worth of weakness when it comes to dealing with the Islamic regime from Europe. That tradition has unfortunately continued through the previous Iran deal and through the Iran talks that they're continuing to speak about now. Just the other day, we saw Joseph Borrell came out saying that he thought designating the IRGC as a terrorist organization would actually harm efforts to reinstate or renegotiate the JCPOA, the Iran deal. Why this is outrageous is because we shouldn't even be discussing reinstating the Iran deal. Nobody should be negotiating with the Islamic regime right now. They should be saying that they support the protesters in their pursuit of regime change and getting rid of the Islamic regime for good. It's not good for the people of Iran. It's certainly not good for the people of the Middle East, and it's not good for the people of Europe or anywhere else in the world either.
And now the European Union, under Joseph Borrell, deciding not to go ahead with this, but the European Parliament and many Iranians themselves, of course, calling to add the IRGC to the terror list?
Yeah, so the sentiments on the ground in Iran and in the Iranian diaspora as well are very consensus on this issue. Everybody wants the IRGC recognized as a terrorist organization because that is exactly how they've behaved for the last 44 years under this current regime. Additionally, there are a lot of elected officials, including in Europe. We saw the non-binding European Parliament resolution stating that the IRGC is a terrorist organization. That's a great first step. It's not enough. More should be done. The EU, all of the EU, and really every nation in the world should be recognizing the IRGC as a terrorist organization. And as I said, we need these world leaders to step up and say that they support the people of Iran who are pursuing regime change. This is enough. It's been going on for 44 years. It's only gotten worse, and it's only going to get worse the more leeway we give Iran. This is a mafia regime that's controlling the country. There is nothing to be gained by negotiating with them, and we need to take a very tough zero-tolerance policy towards Iran, whether it be on the nuclear deal or their export of terrorism or their gross human rights violations.
And so what can you tell us now about the ongoing protests in Iran? You've been tracking the arrests and the executions. Are they deterring the protests going on in the country?
So I think that these arrests and, of course, the executions are absolutely not deterring the protests. If anything, they're doing the opposite. What we see in this round of protests that we haven't seen previously in previous years is that this isn't an issue of economics. It isn't an issue of, only women's rights. This is an issue of a unilateral rejection from the people of Iran, be they Persian descent or Ahwazi or other Kurdish minorities. We see minorities who are rising up against the Islamic regime that have never spoken out against the regime before. So there is a unity in this call to action, and there is a very clear message that they want an end to this regime. Now, these protests have continued for over 100 days. They're still continuing, and this is despite the fact that the regime has been not only using lethal force against protesters, including gross, sexual abuse against girls who are protesting, but they have also cut off the internet in multiple cities and multiple times throughout this process. Whenever we see a huge push for protests, we see a direct relation to the regime cutting off internet in those cities. So it's very concerning what's happening, but despite that, we still see that there are protests ongoing, and they show no signs of stopping.
So that's within Iran. And I'm curious to ask about the support that you're seeing outside of Iran for the protests happening inside the country, of which you yourself have been a major voice.
Yeah, on the ground in Israel, I think that there is obviously a consensus against the regime in Iran. But additionally, we see that there are a lot of Israelis who are showing support for the people of Iran against this regime because we share a common enemy, ironically, which is the Islamic regime, who is funding terrorist organizations in the Gaza Strip with Hamas and Islamic Jihad, with Hezbollah in Lebanon and in Syria. And of course, the Iranian people are also suffering at the hands of this terrorist regime via the IRGC or the other security forces such as the morality police, even within the country. So for the first time, we're seeing, even on social media, that there's a huge alliance being formed between the people of Israel and the people of Iran. And I really hope that that continues.
We hope so too. All right, Emily Schrader, thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you.
And moving on, Shas on Tuesday announced the 2 members of the Knesset who will replace party leader Aryeh Deri. MK Michal Malkieli will take his place as Interior Minister, while MK Yoav Ben-Tzur will replace him as Health Minister. The party initially announced on Monday that MK Chaim Biton would act as Health Minister, but later changed its decision. Deri was reluctantly fired by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday following a high court decision which ruled that he could not serve as a minister in the current government. His replacements are set to take up their new duties today. And political divisions in discourse and indeed seemingly widening across the globe and threatening to tear whole nations apart. But Israeli President Herzog proposing a potential solution to the crisis, appropriately dubbed the Exchanging Words Initiative. Aaron Porras reporting.
Herzog saying that it's completely permissible to criticize government, but that it's important to listen and to understand the angers and pains at the basis for our opponents' criticisms through dialogue.
לגיטימי לקיים דיון מעשי על גבולות הגזרה ומערכת היחסים בין הרשויות, ממש כמו שקורה בדמוקרטיות רבות בעולם, אבל בהידברות, בהקשבה, בלי לפרק את היסודות שלנו, בלי לשפוך את התינוק עם המים, בלי לערער את התשתיות שבנינו בעמל כה רב.
So among the tenets of the Exchanging Words plan, Herzog founding a space in the president's residence dedicated to discreet and unique discussions where sensitive and central issues will be discussed with key leaders and involved actors under the mediation of the president's office. Additionally, an innovation education center will also be created at the president's residence in efforts to establish and deepen all communities' sense of belonging in Israel, as well as fostering dialogue between them. But the question, of course, is whether this plan can begin to take root when every suggestion is turned into a soundbite for political pressure. Opposition chief and former Prime Minister Yair Lapid, for one, calling on Herzog to actively intervene by forming a panel that would find, quote, the proper balance between judicial and legislative branches, as opposed to the proposal drafted by Netanyahu's government. And Justice Minister Yariv Levin, key proponent of the current reform plan, suggesting he's unwilling to compromise in the fight against the High Court's activism. And in fact, reports are showing that the ruling to bar Aryeh Deri from the cabinet only hardening his position and making the coalition more determined than ever to push the reforms through Knesset in their current and original form.
And Prime Minister Netanyahu today announcing that he supports calls for the immediate evacuation of the illegal Bedouin village of Khan al-Amar, east of Ma'ale Adumim. Netanyahu's announcement comes days after the government evacuated an illegal settler outpost in Samaria. And the Prime Minister is saying that what applies to Jews must also apply to Arabs. Likud lawmakers visited the site to press the point. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
The village of Khan al-Amar is an illegal Bedouin encampment with about 200 inhabitants. It's located on state-owned land near the growing Israeli city of Ma'ale Adumim. The visit by Likud lawmakers demanding the evacuation comes 2 weeks before a high court hearing about government efforts to evacuate the community.
First of all, unfortunately, the Israeli government has been hesitant for the last 10 years. The result is that instead of a couple of houses, we see additional construction here and even some kind of school created illegally by one of the European countries. And we have to understand, if we will continue to hesitate, there will be a clear message going out of this place, of Khan al-Ahmar, to everyone. You can settle anywhere, just hold on for a couple of weeks, ask for some European support, and then the Israeli government will be hesitant about you too. This is not something we can tolerate.
This week, the army evacuated the illegal Jewish outpost of Or Chaim for a second time. This week, the army evacuated the illegal Jewish outpost of Or Chaim for a second time in 3 days. The message from Prime Minister Netanyahu and the coalition lawmakers: what applies to illegal Jewish construction must also apply to the Arabs.
And innovation on the bar. A fascinating series of events by the Israel Innovation Authority brings Israel's leading innovators to local bars to provide their insights into the country's thriving startup ecosystem. I was able to sit in on their latest event in Rehovot. Let's take a look. We're here at the Israel Innovation Authority's Innovation on the Bar, and tonight we're here to hear from Chairman of Makalu Optics, Shai Agassi. The Israel Innovation Authority's Innovation on the Bar series brings together the country's leading tech experts to discuss the hottest topics in the Israeli innovation ecosystem.
Makalu actually makes a LiDAR, which is the most advanced sensor for autonomous cars. We make what we call 4K 3D bifocals. We see the world at very, very high resolution. It's better than human eye, and extremely fast speeds, 100 frames per second.
An enthusiastic audience listened on as Agassi discussed Israeli innovation, artificial intelligence, and the future of autonomous vehicles.
The dream of cars that will drive instead of us and free us up from both accidents and to have the time to drive it. If you want a car that drives better than humans, you have to see the world better than humans. So far, we sort of had compromise. We have cameras that saw at high resolution, and we had LiDAR that saw at very, very low resolution that had 3D accuracy. What we've done is we've combined the best of both worlds. Very high resolution, is much like camera, but accurate 3D, very long range, 300 meters out, and see the world at night.
In looking to the future, Agassi said he envisions a world where autonomous cars will be a common fixture on city streets.
There's an acceptance today that the question whether cars will drive themselves is no longer on the table. It's just a question of when. But when cars can drive themselves, meaning at a level of performance that's significantly higher than humans, there will be a different question in place, and that's why would we let people drive their car, right? You look at the world's worst man-made pandemic, it's actually car accidents, not COVID. We have $6 trillion of economic damages just from car accidents every year worldwide. Not to mention the pain and emotional pain and suffering that comes to that product. So if you could stop that completely, whether it's by putting more machines that can actually protect people around the car, inside the car, hitting other people, or by eliminating the driver, both these solutions would actually change completely the way a car looks 5 years, 10 years.
The Israel Innovation Authority is working hard in collaboration with government and business to make this dream a reality.
The Israel Innovation Authority does two main things. One is to support companies in all through their life cycle. And starting from 3 people in the garage, ending up with you're 1,500 people doing those great things, right? And all through from academia to practical multi-billion-dollar sales. It's one thing most people know about the Israel Innovation Authority. The second thing is that the authorities serve as a pivot for all different government agencies to do things together. A good example is AI, right? There are many different agencies that touch AI, relate to AI, promote AI in various ways. And what we try to do is to create an organized, coordinated movement forward.
According to Katsir, adopting new technologies such as autonomous vehicles presents a unique challenge because there are many unknown factors.
The main thing that needs to be done is the creation of sandbox, a playground, right? And this is another thing that our Israel Innovation Authority does very well. We bring together companies, academics, regulators, and say, guys, go ahead and play, okay? In 2 years' time, we'll know what's happening. And then regulators can go back and create a very agile, adaptive regulation, and companies can create the product, and everybody wins.
And once again, the Israeli innovation ecosystem is leading the way to ensure a safer, better future for all. Fascinating evening. And now, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around the country tonight and tomorrow, with lows this evening averaging a cooler 9 degrees Celsius or 49 Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow's highs remaining steady, seeing top temperatures of 20 degrees Celsius or 69 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channel, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Lajar Gaveh Lazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.